Hi everyone, you're welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Amaka. In this tutorial, we are going to be learning how to make this beautiful top you're seeing on the thumbnail. Now, this is a continuation of our previous tutorial on how to make this top. I'm going to leave the link of the drafting part in the description box below so that you can check it out later. If you're yet to subscribe to this channel, please click on the subscribe button and also turn on the notification bell so that you will be notified whenever I upload new videos. So let's get started. So I've cut out the fabric and I added my seam allowance. So I added my seam allowance here and all around the cups and on the yoke. So for the back panel, I had to use the complete pattern to cut out the lace. Then I had to cut the pattern paper from the chest point to cut the satin and the lining. Now take note, I have my lining and my satin here. I added half-inch seam allowance on the lining and the satin, which I'm going to use to join the lining and the satin together. So the next thing I'm going to do is to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew with half-inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to illustrate with pins. So I'm going to sew with half-inch seam allowance. After sewing with half-inch seam allowance, I'll push the seam allowance on the lining and top stitch. But before I do that, I would have closed my dart. Remember to close your dart before you join the lining and the satin together. So the next thing I'm going to do is to place the lace on the lining and the satin and I'll sew. Now I'm going to sew the zipper allowance, not the side. I'm going to turn it this way and I'll sew. I'm going to sew the zipper allowance with half-inch seam allowance. Now I'm illustrating with my pins. So I'll sew it with half-inch seam allowance. After sewing with half-inch seam allowance, I'm going to turn it to the right side. Now take note, I'm not going to sew the side. The side is still going to be open. I'm going to sew only the zipper allowance with half-inch seam allowance. So for the front panel, I had to cut two of these. Now I'm going to show you how to sew it. So I'm going to bone the lining. Now I'm going to bone from here to here, from here to here, and here to here. So this is going to serve as the lining, while this will serve as the main fabric. Now take note, I'm going to iron interfacing on both the lining and the main fabric. So after that, I'm going to place this satin on this line, on this fabric, just like this. And I will find the midpoint of this part and I'll pin it down. So this is the midpoint. I'm going to pin it down. Now on this other side, I'm also going to find the midpoint of this part and I'll pin it down. I'm going to pin it together with the satin. So this is the midpoint. Now I'm going to pin it together with the satin. So this is the midpoint. Now I've pinned here. Now these are the midpoints. So I've pinned here and I've pinned here. So the next thing I'm going to do is to rule a straight line on the midpoint, just like you see me doing. So from this line that I ruled, I'm going to start taking my measurement from there. So I'm going to mark half-inch here and I will mark half-inch here. So I'm going to mark another half-inch here and I will mark half-inch here. So I'm just going to mark half-inch intervals. And I'll do the same thing on the lower part. I'll mark half-inch here and I'll mark half-inch here. So I'm just going to mark half-inch intervals. And I'll connect the lines. So after marking, now this is the midpoint of these lines. So I'm going to bring these two lines together. Now I'll hold this one and I'll hold this one, and I'm going to sew. Now I'm going to illustrate with my needle and thread. I'm going to sew with my needle and thread. Then I'll later take it to my sewing machine and sew it neatly. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to sew with my needle and thread. I'll start by sewing with my needle and thread, after which I'm going to take this satin to my sewing machine and sew it neatly. Now take note, I'm not sewing the lining. I'm not sewing it together with the lining. I'm sewing only the satin because I'm still going to remove the satin. I'm still going to separate the satin from the lining. It's only the satin that I'm sewing for now. So I'm going to sew this line down. Then I'm going to hold the next line again and I'll sew it down. I'll hold these two lines and I'll sew it down. I'm going to rule another line here. The ones I ruled are not enough, so that's why I'm ruling another one, because I need 3 pleats on the center front. If you look at the one we are recreating, you will see that they have 3 pleats on the center front. So that's what I'm trying to achieve. That's why I'm adding more lines. So now this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to hold this line and I'll hold this line and I'll sew. It's very simple. All you need to do is just to bring 2 lines together and use your needle and thread and sew, join the 2 lines together to give you a pleat. So it's simple. So after sewing the 3 lines with my needle and thread, now this is what I have. This is the outcome. So after sewing all the lines, I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and sew it neatly. So when I take it to my sewing machine, I'll sew this, and sew this. So this is the first roll. Now let's move over to the second roll. Now for the second roll, the one on the cup, now this is going to be my midpoint. So I'm going to mark my lines, and I'm going to give 1/2 inch intervals. So on the lining, I'm going to mark this part. On the lower part, I'm going to mark this part, and I'll connect this point to this point. So I'm going to connect the points with a vertical line. Now I'm going to work with this line. I'm also going to rule more lines. I'm spacing my lines by 1/2 inch. So this is what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to pinch this and I'll sew. And I'll pinch the second one, the third one, and the fourth one. And I'll sew them down. I'll connect them to this lower part. So I'll connect the points. So on this second roll, I'm going to pin the midpoint. Now this is the midpoint. I'm going to pin it down, and I'll go down to the lower part, and I'm also going to pin down the midpoint of the lower part. Now take note, I'm not sewing this satin to this lining. I'm only splitting the satin. I'm still going to separate the satin from the lining. So I'm going to pinch the lines and sew just the same way I did on the first roll. So I'm going to hold this one and I'll sew it down. I'll hold this one and I'll sew it down. Now I'm going to do it off camera because I don't want this video to be too long. So after sewing, now this is what I have. So this is the second roll. Now I'm also going to do the third one. The same way I did the first and second, that's how I'm going to do the third one. I'm going to start here. So from here, I'm going to mark 1/2 inch to this point. So after marking the upper part, I'm going to come down to the lower part and mark the lower part. So this line is going to come this way. You know the lines are somehow slanted. The pleats are somehow slanted. So this line is going to come this way and I'll connect the points. If you look at that top, you will see that the pleats are kind of slanted. So I'm also trying to achieve those slant lines. So this part is coming to this part. So the same way I did these two rows, that's how I'm going to do the third row. I'm going to hold here and sew it. I'll bring two lines and sew it together. Now I'm also going to do the same thing on this other side. So after sewing with my needle and thread, I'm going to separate the satin from the main fabric, and I'll take it to my sewing machine and sew it with my sewing machine. So right now, I've already sewn it with my sewing machine. So I'm going to trace this fabric and cut it out. Now you see how this part is. This part didn't cover because my satin was not enough. It didn't get to that point. So when making yours, make sure you have enough satin. But it's not a problem. I'm still going to cover it. So now that I'm satisfied with what I have, with the way the pleats are and how they are placed, I'm going to follow the main fabric and trim out the satin. Now after sewing, now this is what I have. Now these are my pleats. I don't know why I feel like my pleats are big. Now while making yours, you can actually use a 1/4 inch. Like you can space your lines by a 1/4 inch instead of using 1/2 inch like I used. So if you want yours to be your pleats to be smaller, you can use a 1/4 inch. I don't know why I just feel like my pleats are big. So what do you think? Are my pleats big? Please let me know in the comment section. So these are my cups. Now I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to place this right side facing right side and I will sew. I'll sew with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now I'm illustrating with pins. So when I take this to my sewing machine, I'm going to sew this part with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So after sewing with 1/2 inch seam allowance, I'm going to have something like this. Now I'm going to place this part on this part, right side facing right side, and I will sew again with 1/2 inch seam allowance. And after sewing, I'm going to have something like this. So the same way I will sew this, I'm also going to sew the other cup the same way. So I'm going to do all these things I just said and show you the outcome. So I have my cup here. Now after sewing, this is what I have. So I'm going to place this dart. You see this point? That's the dart. So I'm going to place this dart point on it and I'll sew like this. So after sewing, I'm going to have something like this. Now the same way I'll sew this, I'm also going to sew the other cup the same way. So this is the lining. I'm also going to do the same thing on the lining. Now these are my bra cups. I've shaped the cups. Now I have a tutorial on how to shape your bra cup. I'm going to leave the link of that video in the description box below so that you can check it out later. Now this bra cup is not a push-up bra cup. It's a normal bra cup, that one that used to look flat. That's why I shaped it. So the next thing we are going to do now, I'm going to show you how to attach your cup to your corset. So this is the back panel. Now if you look at the lace, you see that the lace is somehow excess. It's because I didn't close the dart on the lace. I only closed the dart on the satin and on the lining. So now I'm going to trim off this excess I have here. If you look at the one we are recreating, you will see that it's also the same thing they did. So take note, the sides are still open. I'm going to show you how to attach the front panel to the back panel. After attaching the cups, this is what I have. This is the right side. So let me show you the next thing to do. So I also did the same thing on the lining, and I also boned the lining. Now I'm going to put my bra cup inside the corset, and I'll use my hemming gum to gum the cup to the fabric, and I'll also tack some sides. Now I have a tutorial on how to make corset. I have a corset playlist where I have different kinds of tutorials on how to make corset. I'm going to leave the link of that playlist in the description box below so that you can check it out later. So the part that I pinned down, I'm going to use needle and thread to tack it. So the same way I'm going to do this, I'm also going to do the other cup the same way. Now this is my yoke. I've sewn the lining. I used net to line it. After lining, I pushed the seam allowance on the lining and top stitched, and this is what I have. So this is the second yoke. I'll show you how to fix it to your corset. Now this is my yoke. Now I notched this part, so I'm going to fix the yoke from there. So I'm illustrating with pins. Now what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to take this to my sewing machine, and I'm going to sew with 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to sew the yoke to the corset with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So after attaching the yoke to the main fabric, I'm going to place the lining on the yoke. So the yoke is going to be in between the main fabric and the lining, and I'm going to sew with 1/2 inch seam allowance. After sewing with 1/2 inch seam allowance, I'm going to push the seam allowance on the lining and top stitch. Now I'm illustrating with pins. I want to show you how to do it. So after sewing, I'm going to have something like this. So for the back panel, now I'm going to bring the back panel, and I'm going to join it from the chest point. So I'm going to sew main fabric to main fabric and lining to lining with 1/inch seam allowance. What I have is 1/inch seam allowance. So I'm going to sew it from here. I'll sew it down, and after sewing, I'll turn it. Now for the shoulder, I'm going to bring the front panel and the back panel. I'll join the front panel and the back panel together. Now take note, the front panel has lining, but the back panel doesn't have. So I'm going to use the front panel to cover the back panel. Now after sewing, the seam allowance will be inside. It will be inside, in between the lining and the main fabric. You're not going to see the seam allowance from the main fabric, and you will not see it from the lining because it's going to be inside. And I'm going to sew the shoulder with 1/2 inch seam allowance. The same way I'm going to sew this part, I'm also going to sew the other shoulder the same way. The most important aspect of this tutorial is the front panel. I just want to show you how to achieve this design at the front, the pleats. I have different tutorials on how to make corset. I'm going to leave the link of those videos in the description box below so that you can check them out later. So after sewing, now this is what I have. Now if you feel these pleats are big, you can actually reduce yours. While I was constructing the pleats, I spaced my lines by 1/2 inch. You can actually space your own lines by 1/4 inch. Now another thing I did was to fix fishing lines into the holes. But this is optional. I did this because I wanted the lines to be firm. But this is optional. If you feel there is no need for the fishing lines, it's okay. You understand? But if you still want to use it, you can use it. But I used fishing lines for mine. So because I don't want this video to be too long, I'm going to fix the remaining ones off camera. Look at the ones that I fixed the bones into. I fixed the bone into 3. Now these ones, you see the difference. They are firm, they are standing, and the pleats are pronounced. So after that, I'm going to hem the lower part and show you the outcome. So after sewing, now this is what I have. So what do you think about the fishing lines? Would you like to make yours with fishing lines, or you would rather make yours without the fishing lines? Let me know in the comment section. So this is what it looks like after sewing. Now for the neckline, for the back neckline, I used net to hem it. The same net I used as lining for the yoke, that is the same net I used to hem the neckline. So this is my top. Now this is the right side and this is the wrong side. If you look at the wrong side, you see that you're not seeing the seam allowance from the wrong side and you're not seeing it from the right side. So the next thing I'm going to do is to show you how to lace your cup. We are going to be using fabric placement technique. So this is the lace I'll be using. I'm going to reduce it. I'm just cutting off the one. I'm cutting out the one that I want to use. It's very easy. All you need to do is just to place your lace on the cup and you tack. As you're tacking, you're folding in the rough edges. It's like you're folding it in and you're sewing neatly. You tack neatly. Now I'm using my needle and thread. The thread I'm using is a transparent thread. You can also call it a nylon thread. Some people call it nylon thread. So that's the thread I'm using. It's very good for fabric placement because it doesn't show. After using it, it doesn't show. It doesn't have color. So I'll keep folding in the rough edges and I'll keep tacking. I'll tack it round. At this point, if you've not liked this video, please hit on the like button. Subscribe to my channel to support me. That's the only encouragement I need to keep making more videos. So please support me. Thank you. Now I'm going to reduce the lace because it's big, to enable me to fold it in easily. So I'm reducing the lace and I'll use my pin to pin it down. As I fold, I pin. Fold in the seam allowance and you pin it. Are you seeing what I'm doing? I'm folding in the seam allowance and I'm pinning it down. Now you see this excess I have here. When you have this excess, don't panic. All you need to do is just to cut it open. You either trim it off, it's either you fold it in and sew, or you trim it off. Now let me trim off some parts. So I'm going to use this part to cover it. So it's not a problem. And I'll keep folding in and pinning it down. Did you understand what I did here? I had to cut off some lace from here so that it will not be excess, to not be too much or bulky around there. So I'm going to use this part to cover it and I'll continue with my pinning, after which I'm going to tack. Now I'll cut off this part and I'm going to tack. Now I'm going to tack it neatly. I'll continue with my tacking. Now, time will not permit me to bead this top. I'm just doing this. I just made this top for the sake of this tutorial, so I'm not going to bead it. But if you want to see the beauty of this top, Now you see how it is. So I'm going to tie it. You see how it is. Now take note, this part is still open, so I'm going to sew it. I'm top stitching. I use the lace to cover the other part and I'm top stitching. Now you will do it in such a way that the rough edges will not show. It's not difficult, it's very easy. You understand? Just tack it neatly. Now I will not have time to bead this top, but if you want to see the beauty of this top, just bead it. You see that space in between the pleats, just bead it. That's when you see the beauty of it. So that's just it with this. Now the same way I did this, I'm also going to do this other cup the same way. Now after sewing, I'm going to fix the zipper. After fixing the zipper, I'm going to give this top a thorough press. I'll wear it on my mannequin and show you what it looks like. If you found this tutorial helpful, please click on the like button. Share this video with your friends. Share this video in your sewing groups. Subscribe to my channel if you've not done so. Feel free to ask questions. I'll be in the comment section to answer all your questions. We've come to the end of this tutorial. Thanks for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.